Our next speaker for information is Jeff Vernetti. Jeff was elected for our District 123 state representative, took over at the beginning of the year and sworn in, and here we are at, again, 5 months into what's been going on. They just ended their session last week, and I've asked Jeff to come and if he would share with us some of the things that are going on and also be in a position of answering any questions along that line. So welcome, Jeff Vernetti.
Thank you, Les. Appreciate it. How about Sheriff Edgar, too? One more round of applause for him. I, too, want to thank everybody in the room. I appreciate the support, not just of the club, Central Committee members, the commissioners in particular. We've got a mayor in the house. I appreciate the community's support and involvement. Also, because we're recording, I want to thank my family, too. Without them, I wouldn't be here. It's my son's 22nd birthday today, so happy birthday to Dominic, wherever he is. Hopefully he is being behaved, but it's hard to tell a 22-year-old to behave on their birthday. Yeah, I'll dive right in. Obviously, what our office wanted to do was really, as we paid attention during the election cycle, and it's good to see so many familiar faces that I shared the campaign trail with. People were looking for engagement, participation, and access, and I think we tried to start there. We tried to exceed those expectations. Hopefully people are subscribing to the newsletter. We've really tried to hammer home not just successes, but failures or things I voted no on as well, just to get the information out. But we held the first ever Camden County Day. I was really happy with the participation. We had over 36 people on pretty short notice because we, obviously, as Les said to the sheriff, it takes a while to get used to Jefferson City, finding the bathrooms and figuring out where to park and all that takes a little time. But once you do, able to kind of figure out, my legislative assistant has just been wonderful, and hopefully those of you that have called Angela or emailed have got a quick response. But we had a very successful Camden County Day. We're going to do that again in March. I'd love some feedback on things we could do better, things that we could improve on, but we had some great speakers, a good tour. I know some of you had never been to the Capitol before, so that was great. And then obviously doing the things that you need to do involved in the community with KRMS and the newspaper and things like that. But what I've really tried to do is reach out to the other elected officials. So I hope the commissioners, sheriff's office, our mayors, we've had some regular gatherings, and we're going to try to do a monthly breakfast like we started before I actually took office, the Central Committee. And whether we agree or not or disagree, the school board too. I talked to all 4 school boards. The district only has 2 of the buildings, Camdenton and Climax Springs, but I have over 75% of the School of the Osage students and over half of the Max Creek students. And then we've got a really engaged homeschool population that I almost categorize as the 5th school district. So anything education, I reach out to those boards, those supervisors, big or small, and try to get their feedback on. Obviously, I don't think you can track the success of a session necessarily by bills passing. It's not all about that, but I do have some stats for just those who are interested. Wasn't there last year, but last year the House, and if you take away the budget bills, there's 18 budget bills, only 28 policy bills passed last session, which is a historic low. This year we were able to pass 51 pieces of legislation. Over 3,000 bills are filed, so still in the percentage, that's under 2% that make it to the finish line, but 51 of those passed or have gotten to the governor's desk. He signed some, and we'll be signing others over the summer. The biggest one, I'll talk about some of my personal things later, but I think, obviously one that we all fought for in this room is House Joint Resolution 73, which puts abortion and making that illegal back on the ballot in November of 26. So very happy about that. Very happy about that, and obviously we will all in this room have to get engaged, because that same group that put it on the ballot and made it law is going to be fighting even more so to keep it in law. So we've got to do what we can really over until November of 26 and then beyond. Also, to my committees, I was able to serve on 3. One of those took the majority of my time. I was on the Budget Committee, also on Economic Development and Tourism, so really proud of the the committees I was awarded and had a chance to work on, I think they serve our district quite well. And the budget is one that will be in the news, and rightfully so. You know, you've got a ballooning state budget, you've got federal dollars, rightfully so, that are being cut off, and Missouri needs to figure out how to spend their money a lot better. So the governor, we have a major surplus that has been reduced each and every year, as in particular the Senate side of the building spends that money on projects and other funding needs. So the governor's office, so you get a governor's recommendation, you get the House position, and then the Senate deals with it last. The governor sent a budget to the House, so they all originate in the House. The House starts the budget, the Senate gets it at the end. And the governor recommended leaving about $1.3 billion in surplus. That's that leftover COVID money that we could have in reserve, basically the state saving account. With my work on the budget, we cut $4 billion out of the Missouri budget, and we were leaving $1.8 billion in reserve. Then it went to the Senate, and things got a little messy. They continued to make drastic cuts to the things we sent over, fully funded the foundation formula, which even Governor Kehoe did not want to do, and they were only going to leave about $500 million in reserve. So over $800 million less than what the governor sent, and over $1 billion, $1.2 billion less than what we sent. So obviously that was in the news a lot. We ended up making compromises on a number of different positions and got it closer to that governor level, but the big budget bill that didn't end up getting passed is the budget piece that has a number of earmarks, and it was said in the news that, oh, the House blew the budget up, the House did this, the House did that. The truth of the matter is the Senate had Budget Bill 19, which contains all capital improvement projects. It's buildings, it's no programs, it's no staffing, it's no people, it's nothing along those lines, but it's all building projects and construction projects. The House version was just over $300 million, and the Senate had the budget bill all the way up until the last constitutional day for us to pass it, when it would come back to the House. They sent it over at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. We had till 6 o'clock in the evening to read the thing, decide if we wanted to do it, and the Senate adjourned. So we did not have the opportunity to conference or send them our notes, and they added $500 million back to that budget bill. So it was basically a take it or leave it. Take the Senate position, add in all that money, or leave it, and we left it. Unfortunately, I'm glad that we did. The Republicans talked, and I did not personally, but a lot of representatives and senators and the governor himself had earmarks in those that were important, key projects. Not just fluff, real serious needs, but we've got to be more fiscally conservative, and I think it started with Budget Book 19. So that's been in the news, so I wanted to at least address that, and I'm sure we can talk a little bit more budget. But a lot of things happened this session. You heard a lot about public safety. We got the sheriff's retirement done, so I was happy about that. Passed a capital gains tax, but inside that it had a tax cut, I should say, but it had a number of cuts for families, for seniors, and one of those was really important because I know a lot of people will go to the events with the Changing Table, one of our great local organizations, and diapers and feminine hygiene products were taxed at the same rate as boats. And it's been a long time since I've had kids in diapers, so I did not know that. And when you start to look at what that's doing for Missouri families, 1 in 2 Missouri families now have a real need, financial need, to pay for diapers and feminine hygiene products. So we have now made that tax exempt this year, so I was really excited about that. And then locally, like I said, 51 bills got to the governor's desk. I was honored to have 3 pieces of legislation get to his desk, which is a high for all freshmen in the House. I was involved in really the other big piece of legislation that was really happy that we did. A lot of business owners were concerned about it, and that is the fix to Proposition A. That was the increase in minimum wage, which we left alone at $15 an hour, but it also had really a jobs crippling and business crippling element to it, which had paid time leave and sick leave mandated on Missouri businesses, which is now law. It's law May 1st. But our bill passed by the Senate. I had a bill language in there that I was really happy to work on, really worked with about 6 other people, 2 senators and 4 members of the House, including our own Senator, Mike Brinskeder. He should be, I know that people in the county have certain views of our senator, but I will say on this one in particular, he really worked hard for our district and really the state of Missouri, because this is one that the Democrats were not going to let go of. It's what caused the previous question to be called, and we can talk about that, on both that and the abortion issue on the Senate side, which is a tactic that they rarely use. But I'm very happy to have my name on that piece of legislation. I think that, you know, that was going to do a lot against Missouri businesses. And it's not just the small ones. I think here in this room we fight for small businesses and seasonal businesses and a lot of part-time workers compared to other maybe districts. But, you know, as I got involved in the fight, it's not just, oh, as a business owner, that would be bad. Yes, it would, but you look at the ramifications of what it would do. 87 of 114 counties voted it down. So that, again, getting to, I know some of the questions in the room, is an initiative petition problem that drastically the legislature has to fix. But if you go to really the issue at hand, what businesses would do is they would have passed those costs onto us, the consumer. So if you weren't offering paid time leave, and some industries do, and I applaud those that can afford to do so. I think that we should do whatever we can to support our employees, but I think that the market should dictate that and not the government. And so you get into a situation where those costs would be passed on to us, the consumer, rising costs. The other thing that I think a lot of businesses were going to do, and I talked to several in our district that, let's say they did the job with 10 people, they were just going to do it with 8, and then pay the paid time leave. So you would have seen a reduction in a lot of available jobs for those folks. But I think it was even broader than that. Like our largest employer, my largest employer is the hospital. You know, so it's even big employers that had this issue. You know, I'm interested to see, you know, what sheriff's office with over 100 employees, and what do you do when you get into that amount of employees? Because to stay competitive, you have to usually offer paid time leave or something along those lines. So the hospital, with rising costs of their employees, they offered a program 3 years ago that basically the employees, and a lot of younger professionals took it, maybe those that had a spouse that had their own insurance, but 421 hospital employees took no benefits whatsoever and took a 20% pay raise. Sounds like a good deal if you and your family can make that choice. 2 years later, though, the hospital was in the bad position of, I have to now pay you paid time leave. I'm going to put you back on our benefits program, and I've got to claw that money back. How do you take a 20% cut 2 years later for a competitive field, and maybe you've bought a new house and your mortgage is based on that, or kids in college, or whatever. So the ramification, it's easy. I think all of us, if we, at the election box, you know, you want to pay employees more, check. You want to pay for paid time leave, or you want to support your employees. I mean, I think we'd all do that. It's just educating people on how to do it, why to do it. So I'm really glad that we fought and got that removed. So the governor will be signing that, and we'll be removing that. 2 other pieces of legislation have my name on it. I'm very happy about the transfer of the Lacey Fine Airport land conveyance from the state to the city of Osage Beach. That certainly doesn't mandate they do it. They'll be on their own time frame to make that deal. But long term, from an economic basis, this is the only viable location that we could ever have a commercial airport in this community. Will it happen? Question for whoever's probably in these chairs, elected chairs down the road. I don't think that we're going to have an airport tomorrow, but this certainly is the first step in that. And then last piece, I was very pleased. Obviously, the tragic loss of Officer Carson is felt and is continued to be felt by this community, especially the Osage Beach Police Department. But we were able to memorialize her name with the naming of the Grand Glaze Bridge in her honor. So that will take effect. The governor signs these pieces of legislation by the end of August, and by the time MoDOT puts the sign and stuff up, will probably be a late fall dedication. So I'll make sure that we get that out to the club and to everybody, because we'd really like to have a big event. You know, that was a call that was difficult to make to her husband, but her husband and her family really appreciates the outpouring of love from the community. I know that it was featured on Ozark Law. They had that whole episode, which was just everyone had to relive it again. But it's wonders what we can do as a community when we come together. Last couple of things I want to mention too. I was also able to, and this is really what I put my focus on towards in the next couple of years, being on the budget committee, is I was able to really fight for some things that this community has desperately needed. The first, seeing some of our legalese in the building, I was able to add a treatment court commissioner to the 26th Circuit, which is basically a judge position. It's paid as the same level as an associate judge, but what he or she will specifically deal with will be treatment cases, drugs and veteran related. And talking to Judge Coppin and those in the building that are constantly dealing, our 26th Circuit has one of the largest caseloads and one of the largest backlogs. And it's no fault of the men and women that are trying to churn cases out. Because of the tourism and all of the cases that they see, and especially in the summer, without this position in particular, the backlog's incredible. There's only 4 other circuits in the state that have a higher volume of caseload, and judges are determined on population, not by caseload. So we kind of get skewed, the numbers get skewed because we've got this big influx of visitors, but not people that show up on a census. So was able to add that position, and they'll be hiring he or she in the fall. And then one of the big tentpole things that I ran on is really fighting for our infrastructure needs. I think that this community, I'm sure the commissioners would, as they look at the road and bridge budget just for the commissioners and talking to some of the city officials of what we need. I don't think there's anybody that would argue, but boy, our roads and everything are pushed to the max with, luckily, our visitors. That's the thing that makes our community great. But it puts a lot of strain on those of us that pay taxes here and have to live there and drive on them in February, not just 4th of July. The biggest unfunded need in the county, and it has been for 10 years, according to the TAC committee, is the area at 54 and 5 in Camden, basically from that interchange to about the Walmart, give or take. And so I was able to secure $4 million into the budget this year that will drastically help that interchange, not just make it flow better, but be safer. It's the #1 traffic accident area in the county. Luckily, nothing fatal, but the amount of high school kids coming out of Jack Crowell and in and around that intersection, it leads to a number of fender benders. So you got more officers dealing with it off the road. I know we just had a car flip not too far from there. And it's a high volume, poorly designed, just terribly designed area. I know I don't have all the details. That will be up to MoDOT. They have done a traffic study. The engineers are working on exactly what will be done. We'll be working with the city of Camden. I'm sure the commissioners as well to really get insight there. I know one thing is for certain, they're going to add a 3rd turn lane, 54 westbound as you go towards 5. That causes a lot of the trouble as you try to go north on 5. There's no turn lane, so trucks and semi-trailers are stuck in that right lane, and it really bogs that traffic down. And then I know the city has been working with a developer behind some of the shopping areas, and I think this design will mirror and pair into what could be built in the future. That way, if a developer does build residential area or whatever behind Baumgartner's and Walmart and whatnot, that could be tied into whatever they do here. So I don't have the whole plans, but we do have the money. So I'm really happy that we were able to get that unfunded need done this year. Obviously, some of the struggles too, and just full transparency, it's not all push and yes. The button does not always go yes. You have to fight sometimes against even your own party. There were some things that I personally voted no for that I'm disappointed that passed. One of those is Senate Bill 4, the massive utility bill that will be a burden on all of us. I was a no on that. I remain a no. I think utility companies should pay their own rate and not pass it on to us, the consumer. So when your utility bills and those bills go up, please don't blame me. I was a big no on that one. There were a couple of no's, though, that I'm glad that didn't get across the finish line. One of those is open enrollment. The school boards, all 4 school boards, were drastically against open enrollment in our schools. That would have given the rights to families and the school boards, really. They could have chosen to get out of it, but would allow kids to transfer. And if you're an Osage kid, go to Camden. If you're a Climax Springs kid, go to Camden. But those schools wouldn't have benefited financially from those increased kids, especially on the transportation side. How do you make that work? So I voted no on that. It passed the House, but it didn't pass the Senate. And then there were a couple of others in the news that I was against. One of those was the VLT machines. There's a real push for these gray machines. We see them in our gas stations. You go into Signal and there are people playing at 6 in the morning. I think they're a plague on the poor, but there's a move to try to regulate them, make them legal. And then what's going to happen is you're going to see an overregulation. You're going to see many more places have these machines. I would be one. This is completely up to the county and the prosecutors and whatnot. I don't have a vote in it, but if they ever move to get rid of the machines, which some counties are doing, St. Charles County is one of those that hates the machines, just gets rid of them, I would be a huge supporter of that. But also, I'm for open free market. So right now, they're not illegal. They're gray machines for a reason, because the law is pretty gray on them. But I was a no on that. So I can take some questions, but I'll hit a few that I know. I talked about Budget Bill 19. They will be calling a special session. The governor's going to bring us back in June sometime. This is for probably some with Budget Bill 19, to be honest. It will probably be used by the Senate, especially on the Senate Democrats, to get some of their projects in. But there is a push to try to help save the Chiefs and the Royals with funding for their stadiums. There is a huge piece of competition from Kansas. They have a thing called star bonds, and not to get too much into the weeds, but basically they're offering 70% of the teams to pay for their stadiums. So Kansas it wants the Royals, they want the Chiefs. They want to move the Chiefs right over the border. And there's people, I'm fine if people in the room just, okay, go, that's fine. But it's $50 to $70 million of tax revenue that the state earns on these teams on an annual basis, whether they're good or bad. Obviously, the better they are, the more money the state rakes in. And also, I was a St. Louis resident when the Rams moved. So I'm torn on it, to be honest with you, because state didn't do anything to save my team. They let them go. Then you see how bad it's been for the city of St. Louis and the state to lose a football team. The Royals are the real mess, though, because they've got Nashville and Salt Lake City after them, and the Royals are really in high demand to move. So Missouri is looking at one or two potentially professional teams moving. So the governor's going to call us back to talk about that here in the next couple of weeks. And then the last is IP reform. Again, I will not sit up here and try to give you some answer. I don't know. Rudy doesn't know. It's one of those situations where I know the House has passed a version of it the last 3 or 4 years. It never gets to the Senate. It never gets done. I will tell you, and I don't think Rudy would, I think he'd tell you the same thing. I'll tell you what we've been told, or what the speculation is, that all year there was a push not to do IP reform in case we didn't get abortion back on the ballot. They wanted to be able to use how easy it is to get things onto the ballot through the current IP system. I'm not a defender of that. I'm not saying that's accurate. I'm just saying that is the perception of why it was not a high priority. I will say, though, with abortion getting back on the ballot, with Prop A getting done, I could see it being our top priority next session. The other thing, though, and I'm sure veterans, Rudy's a senior, so he, and not his age. I'm not talking about your age, sir. I'm talking about your time in the House. But no, there's a real sentiment that next year is going to be messy. The abortion and Prop A were passed with the Senate calling the previous question. It's a common thing used in the House. It's basically how the floor leader can stop debate. And if you're tired of hearing the Democrats talk, they call the previous question, we go to the vote, the Republicans win. On the Senate side, they don't typically do it. They have not done it much. It's rare. It's once a year, once every couple of years. It hasn't been done for several years. And they did it twice on 2 big issues. I do know, because I was involved in the Prop A stuff, the negotiations were going on for that for the last 3 weeks. The Democrats just wouldn't make a deal. They wanted to control the language of how House Joint Resolution 73 was going to be on the ballot. So they wanted to dictate what someone at the ballot box would see, which is how they manipulated Prop A to Amendment 3 to passing. They wanted to make it fluffy and let moderates say, no, we're fine with the law the way it is. So I know that was a deal breaker. There's transgender language in there, and they wanted that completely stripped. So it really came down to what they wanted on 73 and what Senate Republicans didn't want to give them. So no, I don't have an answer of why we didn't. That's what I'm saying. I like to think that if you compare it to past years, there were some successes here, but I don't think you can just go on, hey, we passed double the bills and we got a few big things done, that it's a success. Because there's some no's in here, there's there's many of us that aren't happy about, that didn't get done. But that's obviously, I think, the biggest priority for next session. But no, I think that's the main things. I kind of rambled through a lot of that, but happy to take any questions.
Could you talk
Yeah, that's another one that we really tried to fight this year. The question was the efforts to eliminate or reduce the income tax. Governor Kehoe's one of his big tentpole items is to eliminate state income tax. I know that two of the architects of that are heavily working on that. They took most of the session actually to try to figure out, there's some states that are a real model for that, Tennessee in particular, and how are they able to do it? I think the question is we can do it. Tennessee did it. They did it like gangbusters. I think the elimination of the capital gains tax cut, that cut is a step in that direction. But if you look at the states that have done it, I think Missouri needs to get comfortable for what replaces it. Because obviously we still got to have roads and programs and things like that. So Tennessee has moved to a system where it's more based upon what you buy. It's more based on a sales tax. Their gas tax is higher. I think we in the state need to get comfortable of, okay, let's eliminate the income tax. Let's eliminate property tax, one of the most fraudulent taxes that has ever been perpetrated on the American taxpayer. But county budgets are made up of that. So I'm fine with the cut, but what? And I think we have to get comfortable with it. My parents live in Nevada. They have a gas tax that's 2.5% higher, so they pay easily $1 more a gallon, and they have a massive sales tax. So their loaf of bread's $1 more. If you want to go to a consumption-based tax, I'll go along with you. Show me the math. But again, I think that's the challenge, sir. It's not the if, it's the what. How do we have officers, and how do we have roads, and how do we have safety, how do we have programs? A lot of that, too, is what we're getting to. We just got to cut a lot of stuff. There's so much wasteful spending. There's so much garbage. Thankfully, President Trump has eliminated the Department of Education. Our Department of Elementary and Secondary Education is an abomination. They just put forward, I'll tell you, sitting in those budget hearings, most departments are really trying, and I will give them, like Department of Natural Resources, they are really trying to get themselves better. There's a lot of departments, but there's some, and DESE's one of them. What did I spend last year? Add 3% to it. Here's my proposal. And we're just not doing that anymore.
Jeff, this has probably come up, but I don't remember seeing anything about it. I've heard it's been sunshined. But why can't Missouri join the other 21, 24 states and keep biological men out of women's sports?
Yep. No, it's a good question. It's actually law now that we can. The problem is, back when it was passed into law, there's a sunset. So it expires next year. And so it was one of the bills that we were going to pass it the last day. But when the Senate went to their two bills that called the previous question, the Senate adjourned. So then the only thing the House could pass is anything that the Senate had sent us, and we couldn't make any changes to it because there was no more amendments to it. So we were going to pass the elimination of the sunsets. There were some things on there, though, that the House was not comfortable with. Not that one. It was men and women's sports and transgender surgeries were the two that our law. They're illegal, but they have a sunset. We were going to eliminate that, but there were some bad ones in there too. I'm not saying that we wouldn't have done something with it, but that was one of the ones that got killed at the finish line. So it will be brought back again next year. The House passed it glowingly. It's just a Senate thing that got bogged down. I'm with you and support you, and I don't think there's a Republican that would argue with you. Any other questions? There's no way I answered all the questions, but that's great. That's fantastic.
I greatly appreciate Jeff being here. One of the things that he mentioned is the fact about the governor calling a special session that has to do with the chiefs and the tax stuff and doing that. My side of me says I would hope that the chiefs or the state would say, look at the chiefs and see how much they're paying their staff and how much they're paying their players, and maybe take a shot at that as well, so it isn't just us as a state funding them.
It's hard to argue with that. That's certainly a viable one that I think most of us either on the fence or that are a no would agree with. I think the challenge is when a neighboring state, and again, this back to gentleman's question about taxes, when Tennessee is doing what they are to compete for our businesses and our residents, and when Iowa is doing more things, and Arkansas is doing more things, and Kansas is offering 70%, which is a financial loser, actually. They'll actually pay more than they'll ever earn back in taxes, and they don't care because they don't have a team. It's a vanity thing. And that's back, I was in sports radio back when the Rams moved, and I know that it was brought up. Again, it was a Democratic governor at the time, and the temperament was different, but that, if you rewind in your heads, sports fans in the room, back in like the mid-2000s, you had a number of professional teams getting unbelievable deals from states all over the country, not just this one. It was the way to do it. And until all states, Missouri included, just puts their foot down, I'm with you, Les, but when you have a neighboring state offering to take our two teams, or two of our 4 teams, we only have 4 professional sports teams in Missouri, and they're going to take 2 of them. That's a challenging pill to swallow, but no, I don't like the finances of it either. Right now, too, it's basically the proposal, again, not to get too in the weeds, but it's basically acts like a reverse TIF. The money that they've been spending in taxes so far is what they are receiving a tax incentive to go towards the build of their stadium. And then anything that additional comes in, the state gets. There is also, unlike the Rams deal, which was a terrible deal that the state should have never made when they got the Rams the first time, but there's a clawback provision in this. So let's say 20 years from now, the Chiefs say, no, we're gonna move. Any money that was paid in those 20 years has to be immediately paid back to the state. So there's an immediate clawback for any reason they move, which again, isn't a reason to necessarily vote yes, but there are some things in there that were well thought out. What I didn't like, and what I think a lot of the legislators, and I won't speak for Rudy, but I just don't like the process. I feel your frustration and your frustration about IP and stuff. You have these big ticket things that we've got to get done. We know we need to do them. And it's literally like pushing a boulder uphill. But the governor brought us the stadium proposal the day we had to vote on it. And then it had to pass, both the House and the Senate, the day he brought it to us. So you can get things done quickly if you want to. And you've got to decide what you want to get done quickly. And so there's a lot of us that didn't like that. And I will say I've been in a lot of sales meetings in my life that was very soft sell. It was very vote your conscience, vote your district. There was no pressure. There was no arm twisting, which I'm not going to say doesn't happen on other bills. It was basically, here's the proposal. We'd like to save the teams. Please go vote. That was about how complex it is. I just don't like voting on complex things with very little time, very little opportunity to talk to people and get people's feedback. But
the other comment I would make has to do with this IP reform, and he mentions about the fact with the abortion issue, it's going to be on the 2026 ballot. However, it also says that the governor could call for a special election prior to
very true.
2026. My concern about that is if that happens and you don't get a chance to really look at the IP reform next year in session, because if they call that vote ahead of time, you won't even get a chance to talk about that. So just keep your antennas up about that and make sure you're aware of what's going on.
I mean, I'm not a pollster. I just know that polls say that special elections tend to not have the attendance that you're looking for. And on this one, we're going to need everybody, not just Republicans, but we're going to need the moderates that just had a few issues with the past law and were on the fence and then voted, okay, that want some of the very minor exceptions that are going into this for rape and incest. So, I'm with you, Les. I don't think there's a chance ever that it passes if it's done in a special. The issue for Republicans, though, and this is just something to pay attention to, is this is going to come up at a midterm election. Democrats tend to get, especially when there's a Republican president, no matter how good he's doing, is Republicans are going to have a real trouble in 26 because the easy argument is for the other side because they're not in office. Hey, we could do it better. You see how he's doing, bop, bop, bop. And so that hurts a lot of down ticket representatives. There is a real sentiment that the House and Senate will lose seats, that it's going to be a no question, a no-brainer that's going to happen. But then when you put this sort of a hot button issue on there, it's going to be really dicey. If you thought we needed to mobilize to eliminate what happened with Amendment 3, it's going to show, it will pale into comparison to what we're going to have to do to rally people to get this to pass.
Even if you pass IP reform next year,
Sure.
if it looks like the last time, it will then be 2028 before it takes
Correct.
effect. So the Amendment 3 concerns are significant, but we don't know what the next big issue, the next big leftist issue is, where we're going to be inundated with the paid college kids and lying to people so they'll sign the things.
Well, I'll tell you the
Could be
next one.
Gun control could be anything.
It's going to be Prop A. They're going to put Prop A back on the ballot to get paid sick leave back on the ballot and try to make it constitutional. There's one thing that we can do on IP reform, I think, to combat the timing issue of if you pass it and when does it become effect. There's a big push, and I'll tell you, whoever came up with this, it certainly wasn't me, but it's a great idea, is when you pass IP reform, whatever that looks like, whatever those mechanisms look like, you put language in there to say that you can defeat any constitutional item that was put on to the Missouri Constitution through initiative petition reform with the same mechanism that it had to pass. Meaning, if we pass a more complex IP reform, which we should, but there's something that got on into the Missouri Constitution 6 years ago that we hate, you could get rid of it with an easier mechanism. I'm just telling you that, I know. I don't disagree.
Is there any way to add an emergency clause or something that would make the IP reform take effect immediately or in the first year after it's passed?
There is, if you
instead of
get enough votes for it, and we're two House members down. There's been 2 that have resigned that have not been replaced yet. Yeah, so it is. You have to prove to those that understand the emergency clause, though, that it's constitutional that you pass it, which is a challenge. Yeah.
Well, I want to really thank Jeff for being here tonight. You know, you look at both he and Chris and starting out in January and where they are in this few short months and the things that they're doing and their involvement, and we need to give them their support and listen intently is what it is. Jeff will be around too as well. You've got a question for him, take advantage of that and ask him. But thank you very much, Jeff, for being here tonight. So thank you, everyone, for coming tonight. If any of you didn't get an opportunity to join our club, do that tonight before you leave. And again, we do have a few specials on some of the shirts and things we have over there with jackets. Thank you very much. Our next meeting will be in September, but we will be hearing more and more about our Patriot Dinner this summer.